Just when I thought I heard it all, I see or I hear another piece of just terrible advice. There's so much bad advice out there. It's so accessible nowadays. I'm not just talking about online or content creators. I'm also talking about maybe your friends and family. Look, I'm a realtor and a former financial advisor at a bank. Let me tell you 10 things that you've probably heard of before that is just complete garbage advice. And then I'm going to rank them in terms of how insane they actually are. So without further ado, let's jump in. Myth number 1, you don't need an agent. Just use the listing one. Let me start off with this. Imagine you're being sued and you know the other side is bringing a lawyer with them to court. Would you not bring your own lawyer just because the other side already has one? I hope not. Look, a realtor is a real estate representative. Just like a lawyer represents their clients, so do realtors. The listing agent has a signed agreement with their client, who is the seller, to protect their best interest at all times, not the buyers. Now, there is such thing as multiple representation, which is where the buyer and seller are both represented by the same brokerage or even the same agent. But in most cases, when a buyer simply walks up to the listing agent, that agent only represents the seller. So the buyer is treated instead as a customer and not a client. In fact, the term customer used to be the official term until too many people complained they couldn't quite understand why they weren't being treated the same way in a transaction. They felt betrayed, and so they replaced the term customer, that could be confusing, with the term self-represented party. If a buyer walks up to the listing agent to write an offer and the buyer reveals crucial information, well, the listing agent will share that information with their seller client because that is part of working in your client's best interests. If you're the seller and your agent was just told the buyer's pre-approval amount, wouldn't you want to know that information? And here's the kicker. The buyer's agent is paid for by the seller at the time of closing. So whether the buyer brings their own agent or not, they aren't paying a dime for their expertise. Even if the buyer goes directly through the listing agent, the seller still pays the same commission. It's just that the listing agent now pockets both sides rather than splitting the commission. I can't even think of one scenario where the buyer actually benefits from going through the listing agent rather than just getting their own agent. So congratulations, myth number 1 earns the first spot in the S tier. Straight up insanity. Moving on, myth number 2 is you need a 20% down payment. I'm only going to cover the residential side, and the answer is no, but there are some rules to it. The key here is if you intend to occupy the property as your principal residence, you can put less than 20% down payment, but it depends on the amount. For homes up to $500,000, the minimum is 5% down. Now, for the portion that is above $500,000 and up to 1.5 million, you need 10% down. And for anything above 1.5 million or more, that's where you need a minimum of 20% down payment. But if you are putting less than 20% down, you will be required to obtain mortgage insurance, usually through CMHC or a private source. But don't worry, your lender or your bank will take care of this step if applicable. Just know that mortgage insurance is not free. And with a 5% down, there's a 4% premium. With a 10% down, there's a 3.1% premium. 15% down, a 2.8% premium. Now, if you're putting 20% down, there's no obligation, therefore no premium. And that premium gets added to your mortgage balance. And in Ontario, the goods and service tax on that premium has to be paid up front at the time of closing. So yeah, 20% is ideal, especially if you want to avoid going through mortgage insurance, but it's definitely not mandatory. But if your plan is to wait years just to hit 20% down payment, this might actually cost you more in rising home prices than what you would save by avoiding mortgage insurance. So this is just simply an incorrect statement. So we're going to be putting this in C, misguided, but understandable. Next up, myth number 3 is always renovate before selling. There's been a lot of studies on this, and we're going to break down a few shortly. Just know that not all renovations give you the same return. In fact, return on investments for renovations has actually been declining in most recent years due to the fact that there's labor shortages, rising material costs, and higher interest rates. According to a 2025 report, the average return on investment for home renovations in Ontario dropped noticeably since 2023. From 2023 to 2025, kitchen renovations fell from about 75% to about 62%. Bathrooms from 70% to around 58%. basement finishing from 65% to 50%. But this is across all renovation types, including luxury upgrades, which usually see a lower return because they appeal to a small buyer pool. Here are my 2 golden rules to remember. The more you spend, the lower your chances of recovering all of it. And 2, the more personal or custom the renovation, the lower your chances of recovering all of it. And studies across Canada back this up. A mid-scale kitchen renovation typically returns between 60 to 80% of its cost. On the other side, a minor kitchen refresh, like refacing cabinets or updating counters and appliances, can see between 75 to 100% return on investment, according to a Toronto study. And exterior updates like windows, siding, or roofing tend to return only 50 to 80% depending on the scope and the quality. So interestingly, smaller updates often outperform big overhauls. A Royal LePage survey found that outdoor entertaining spaces and landscaping can boost home value by about 10% on average. This one is going to land in D. It's very context dependent. If you can do a lot of the work yourself, you can absorb a lot of those labor costs. You probably have a lot more room to generate a better return on investment. But what I can say for most sellers before entering the house is focus on what works. Clean, good layout, well kept, and focus on a good first impression. Myth number 4 is bigger is always better. Wrong. You know what bigger always means though? Bigger bills. More to heat, more to cool, more to maintain, more to clean. According to Natural Resources Canada, heating alone makes up for roughly 60% of a home's total energy use, and that cost scales directly with square footage. On top of that, property taxes scale directly with assessed value, which, guess what, also scales with square footage and home size. And let's be honest, you're gonna spend half your weekend cleaning these spaces that you barely use. Now, there are 2 times where bigger does make sense here. So 1, you've got an expanding family and truly need the space. And 2, you're buying a fixer-upper that you plan to renovate and occupy, since more square footage often means more upside on resale when you add value strategically. Overall, I would say this one ranks in B tier. It's very emotionally driven. A lot of people automatically believe that bigger just means better, and there's no more thought that goes into it, when in reality, all it means is bigger bill, bigger headaches, and less money saved up. Moving on, myth number 5 is renting is throwing money away. I mean, there's some truth to this, but it's not universal. Depending on your city, your timeline, just your position in life, where the interest rates are at, renting can make a lot of sense. In the short term, owning a house is almost always more expensive than renting a similar house. Mortgage interest, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, it adds up very quick. But in the long term, real estate has always outperformed that person who rents and invests the difference. And that is even including in those times where there were market crashes. Don't buy just to buy. Buy because you're ready. Homeownership actually fits your lifestyle, your career plans, and your financial comfort zone. Renting is not necessarily throwing money away. You're paying for flexibility. So there is some truth to this statement. I don't think that it lands itself in context dependent. I think it's more misguided, but very understandable why somebody would believe this. All right, we're halfway through the video. I just want to say real quick, 97% of you guys watching right now are still not subscribed. If you like this video or this type of content, consider hitting the like and subscribe button. I would truly appreciate it. And that way you won't miss out on my future uploads similar to this one. Let's jump in. Myth number 6, list high. You can always come down later. Definitely don't do this. This is the one strategy that will kill your listing almost immediately. Overpricing does not leave you room to negotiate. It leaves you room to sit on the market for longer periods of time. The first 2 weeks on the market are everything. This is crucial. This is when your listing is the most fresh, the most visible, is being sent to active buyers that are working with agents who are actively looking and have listing alerts set up. If you miss this window and after a price reduction or 2, people will just outright assume there's something wrong with your house. Never list high thinking you can just come down later. You're just burning momentum. Correct pricing builds urgency for buyers, drives multiple offers, and positions you perfectly to to sell for more. I'm going to say this one ranks in A. This is financially dangerous. Although it may work, there might be a house that sells that was overpriced. It happens. Majority of the time, you're going to see that this was terrible for your listing. People see how long they've been listed for. Even if you terminate the listing and you relist, you're going to fool the general population up until they've met a realtor who's going to tell them that this has actually been listed for 6 months. Myth number 7, you don't need a pre-approval before you start shopping. I hear this one all the time. It's one of the biggest rookie mistakes that buyers can make. Without a pre-approval, you don't actually know your budget, so you're shopping blind. Let me tell you a story that I've heard of. It's not one of my clients, but I've heard of something happen like this in the past. Clients were not pre-approved. They fell in love with a house at $700,000. They spoke to their agent who they've instructed to place an offer. Of course, their agent recommended that they go see the bank. The buyer said they don't want to waste any time, so just make it conditional to financing. We'll figure it out when we get there. Agent says, okay. 2.5 weeks go by for their condition, and guess what? They found out they're only approved for $550,000. So now 2.5 weeks have gone by, and yeah, the perfect home. The one that checks every single box, and it was listed for $540,000 had sold in those 2 weeks. Meanwhile, they were busy bidding on a property that was $150,000 over their actual budget. And of course, you've guessed it, they could not find something remotely similar to that house that they missed out on. Getting a pre-approval is not just paperwork, it's your foundation. And it's free. Look, if you're thinking about borrowing multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars, step 1 should always be going to see your bank or talking to a lender. I don't even know why this needs to be explained. So this one, straight up insanity. Next up, myth number 8 is wait for the crash. It sounds smart until you realize that nobody times the market perfectly. If it was so easy, then everybody would do it. Look, here's the truth. Time in the market beats timing the market. Over the long term, like I said, homes have performed exceptionally well, even when calculating over 10 years, starting right before a crash. While you're waiting, you are paying someone else's mortgage, not building any equity. I hope you're at least saving the difference. I heard another real estate content creator say this. I'm not sure who it was anymore. I'm drawing a blank. I think it was Ryan Serhant, but I can't seem to find the video that he says this. I really hope I'm crediting the right creator. He said, waiting for the market to crash to buy a house is like waiting for the perfect weather to buy a convertible. When that perfect weather hits, you know who else wants a convertible? Everyone. If you're waiting for the crash, it's more likely to cost you more in higher home prices than if you just bought right now. So this one can join the S tier, straight up insanity. Myth number 9, you must have good credit to buy a home. This is wrong. Your banks are not even looking at the credit scores. They assess overall credit health like income, debt to income ratios, and employment stability. Your credit score, all it's doing is determining what kind of rates that they can offer you. Now, the rates they offer you do affect the payment that you receive, which can ultimately affect the whole application. Yes, a higher credit score will secure you a lower rate, but it's not shutting the door if you have a bad credit score. If you want to know the real impact of your credit score, I've made a whole video on this topic. Be sure to go check it out right after this video. I can see why a lot of people believe this. So it's going to land a spot in the C tier, misguided but understandable. Finally, myth number 10, selling your house yourself will save you money. If you're thinking of selling your house yourself without a realtor to save the commission, unfortunately, the numbers don't lie. In Canada, over 90% of homes sold through the MLS system, according to CREA. For sale by owner is rare and for a good reason. Looking at the US data, which mirrors Canadian trends by the way, the National Association of Realtors reports that for sale by owner homes sold for a median of $380,000 in 2024, while agent assisted homes sold for $435,000. That's $55,000 less. Yeah, for sale by owner sellers saved the 5% commission, or just about $22,000 for this example, but after factoring in the lower sale price, that's a net loss of $33,000, and that is before considering the stress and the work that goes into it, meaning the photography, the staging, the marketing, the showings, negotiations, and legal compliance. Paying for professional expertise can save you money, time, and headaches. Don't confuse the upfront cost with the overall value. So this one's gonna earn a spot in the A tier. being financially dangerous, because most of the time you're going to cash out net negative from doing this. It's not worth it. There you have it. 10 myths that people unfortunately believe and make financial decisions based on these myths. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. It really helps me out. I would really appreciate it. Be sure to send this to someone who's either buying or selling or just thinking about it. I'll keep breaking down finance and real estate insights for Canadians to keep everything simple so that you can skip the BS. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.